This interview is part of the Oral History Project sponsored by the State Bar of New Mexico and its Senior Lawyers Division. I'm Sarah Bradley, a member of the Senior Lawyers Division of the State Bar. Today is April 22nd, 2008, and I'm interviewing Dan Sosa in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Justice, is there anything about your childhood or your early adolescence that influenced the direction of your life?
Probably the fact that I liked politics and got involved in campaigning for Governor Mabry, and also the fact that when I was a kid, I used to sell papers at the old courthouse in Las Cruces, and the uncle that reared me was sheriff. I used to go there and sell papers, and I used to shine shoes all over the place. And I saw this red toe-headed young man in court. I'd go and listen to the trials, and I was very impressed with him. And he was a district attorney, and I thought, my Lord, if I could ever be district attorney, that'd be the biggest thing in the world for me. So I had started thinking about law at that time, and that person was Barton Threet. And his son, he later served on the Supreme Court after he served as district attorney, but he only served one term, and then I guess was defeated. The thing that really hurt me about this thing was that when I graduated from law school, came back and decided that I was going to run for district attorney, my lifelong dream. I was running against Jack Mavidi in the primaries in Doñana, Lincoln, and Otero counties. And it was going to be a tight race. I knew it. It was right after World War II. And behold, the guy that was a mentor, the one that Barton Threet went ahead and openly endorsed Jack Mavidi for the position. It crushed me. Well, later on, I used to kid his son, who's an attorney in Albuquerque. I used to tell him the story, and I said, God, your dad sure let me down. And I said, he didn't even know who I was. And he just went ahead and declared that he'd be for Jack Mavidi. And it hurt me. But those were the seminal parts of my thinking about law.
Did you then grow up in Las Cruces?
Well, I was born here. I was born and grew up here in Cruces. And I've spent all my life in Cruces except time in the military service during World War II, time at the law school, to graduate, and then time to serve on the New Mexico Supreme Court. Other than those days, this is my home.
Did you then go all the way through school here in Las Cruces?
I went through high school. I went through New Mexico State, and then I couldn't go any further. I couldn't go to law school here, no law school, so I had to go to Albuquerque.
Did you work before you started law school?
Yes, I taught school at Obesia. I was taught social sciences, and I was also the coach. And then after that first year, this friend of mine who had gotten me the job to teach in the first place and who had graduated from college with me, Haskell Smith, asked me, hey, Stan, if you stay here next year instead of going to law school, I'll make you the principal of Obesia. He said, the teachers love you and you get along with the kids, so I'm going to run for county school superintendent. And if I win, I'll do that. If you and your family will help me and gain the position of county school superintendent. And I said, heck, certainly my family will be for you, but I can't promise you that I'll be back. I want to go to law school. So we campaigned for Haskell, and he won. So when it came to, well, I'm going to go to law school, I asked this uncle of mine that reared me, Dick Trevize. I said, Dick, here's this opportunity. What should I do? And he said, well, I'd take Mr. Smith on his offer. He said, because you're going to be making money here, and over there you're going to be losing money because you don't have an income over there, and over here you'll have. So he advised against going to law school. And that's upset me, so I decided I'd go to law school. So that's it. Interesting things.
Yes, it is. Did you, you'd mentioned being gone during World War II. Was that before or after law school then?
Before law school. I went into the service right after Pearl Harbor. I went in, and I went in before the draft even started. And the reason I went in is because I wanted to choose my branch of service. So I took an exam and to be a cadet, an Air Force cadet, and I passed it. So there again, another thing in my life. All my buddies here said, "Hey, you're crazy. Look, they've promised us here at the ASTP program that if we stay in school until we graduate, that then they'll call us. But we'll be able to get our commission and we'll go in as commissioned officers. So stick to school instead of going into the service." I said, "Oh, I'm going to pick my branch of service." And I did. Well, it was about 6 months later that they were all called in. They were all, they had to register for the draft and they were all called in. So those are the fickle fingers of fate.
Which branch did you go into?
I went into the Air Force.
Did you fly?
Oh yes, I flew 35 combat missions over enemy-occupied Europe and in B-24s. And interestingly enough, I thought I wanted to be a pilot when I went in, but they gave us some tests at SAC, what they call SAC, San Antonio Aviation Cadet Center. And my aptitude was in being a bombardier. So they shifted me off into bombardiering school. So I became a bombardier.
So then you came back and finished school at New Mexico State?
I came back and finished school at New Mexico State under the GI Bill.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and then I took my GI Bill to law school and ran out of it. Here's an interesting story. I ran out of my GI Bill, and I had met Rita, and we were going to get married, and I was going to quit law school because I'd run out of money and I'd run out of the GI Bill. And we were discussing at the Sun, and this guy, Jacob I. Rosenbaum, said, "Hey, Sosa, why are you going to quit school?" And I told him, "Jake, I don't have any more money." And he said, "You're going to let money keep you from graduating from law school?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, look," he said, "there's a lot of others that would love to be in law school. They don't have the aptitude and they don't have the ability, and you do. Look, promise me that you won't quit school, and I will pay for your tuition, I'll buy your books, and I'll give you some money every month." And I said, "Jay," he said, "Yeah, go ahead and get married. Put your wife to work." "Where's she working?" I said, "She's working at the bank in Santa Fe." He says, "Well, you can get her to work at the bank in Albuquerque, and then that'll help you get through law school." And I did. What he did, his family had wanted to set up some kind of a scholarship to law school, but Jay went in, he had gone into the service, had never seen combat, and he wanted to help somebody. So he saw me, he knew that I had been through combat, and he went ahead and gave me his GI Bill. In other words, he put in for the GI Bill, and every time he got his monthly, what was it, $65, he'd give it to me, and he paid for my books and for my tuition.
That's an amazing story.
Yeah. And the good Lord blessed old Jay. Last time I saw him, I guess he still is in Cleveland, Ohio. I went to Cleveland for a funeral of my wife's sister in Akron, and I called Jay, and we got together. So I've seen him just maybe 3 or 4 times since law school.
Was he a classmate of yours then?
A classmate of mine, and he was from Albuquerque. Jacob I. Rosenbaum. He was one of my big first angels.
Were there any professors in law school that were of particular influence to you or a role model?
I guess they all were. They were all pretty very interesting individuals who had made a life of their own before law school. And they had transferred over here and come over here in retirement, so they came over. I did have one talk with the first dean of the law school, Dean Gozowitz. They had started out so strictly and they were flunking everybody out right and left. And George Long, the only black in our law school, had transferred over from Georgia or Alabama, someplace in the South that wouldn't accept him at their law school, so they would let him go any place he wanted to go. So he came to New Mexico and he went to law school here. I told the dean, I said, look, I've discussed law with George. George Long was his name. See, I keep forgetting some of these things. I have to think about it because of my stroke, I think. Well, in any event, I talked to the dean about George, and I said, he knows the law. He may not be able to put it down in writing or something. There's something wrong. But he'd be a darn good lawyer, and he'd go back and help those people that need help in the South. And he said, well, Dan, he said, we don't want to lower our standards. He said, we want to be sure that the ones that graduate from our law school are not only good, but that they're the top, that they're the best. And I said, yeah, but you're flunking a lot of others who could be adequate lawyers. And he said, well, he never changed his mind. And George never made it. He flunked out. And I used to ask, when I became the Chief Justice, I used to ask the Dean of the Law School, I said, hey, how many guys do you flunk out nowadays? Because we started out with, I think it was something like 76, and graduated 26. And of the 26, 21 passed the bar the first time, and 5 didn't. So in any event, the deans used to say, look, when you went to law school, all you needed was a college degree. Now we have the LSAT, we have a score to guide by, and so we take the best ones, and they're adequate, they're ready for school. And in your class, they were just college graduates. So that's the reason he said why so many in the early classes flunked out, you know.
What class were you in at the law school?
Well, I would have been in the first class if I hadn't taken 1 year off to teach school. I was in the second graduating class in 1951.
Were there any other members of your family that were lawyers, or?
Well, Ed Trevice, a cousin of mine, went to law school, but he did it up east. He went, I guess, George Washington or Georgetown, I don't know, one of the other schools. He was the only other member of my family.
So it was really your experience at watching the district attorney that influenced you?
Martin Threet, yes, absolutely. I loved what he was, and later on I wanted to be a DA, and I became a district attorney.
Well, then obviously you must have gotten involved in politics along the way.
Yes, I did. I came back after World War II and decided that, fact is, when I got out of law school, I was looking for a job, and I came down and interviewed several firms. And they said, well, you've got a child and you've got a wife, and you'd have to get so much. And I don't think we can afford to hire anybody right now in our school. So I thought, my God, what am I going to do? So anyway, I went back to Santa Fe at that time. And Tom Campbell, who was a district attorney here, called me and he said, hey, Dan, how would you like to be my assistant? He said, you'll be my only assistant and I'll pay you so much. Oh, wow. So I came back and I was assistant district attorney. But unfortunately, I was only assistant district attorney for about 6 months because Tommy ran and lost the next election for district attorney, and C.C. Chase followed him, and I was out of a job. So when I left the DA's office, I looked at the city judge's race here and decided that I'd run for city judge. You didn't have to be a lawyer to be a city judge. So I ran on that platform. I'll be the first attorney on your courts. I think it's about time to upgrade our courts. And I was elected, and I served there 2 terms, and then I ran for district attorney and won. So that's the history of it. And then I had 3 counties, Doñana, Lincoln, and Otero, and that gave me an edge when I was running for the Supreme Court after I had been appointed. Because in those days, in '75, when I was appointed, you were appointed, and the next election you had to run for it. So I was appointed, and then lo and behold, the presiding judge of Albuquerque, Harry Stowers, decided that he was going to run against me, you know. Well, actually, that isn't true. He didn't decide that he was going to run against me. He decided that he was going to run for the Supreme Court. But a strange thing occurred. While I was on the court, Justice Sam Montoya, who was a member of the court, told me, "Hey, Dan, I know you're going to run for office for the court, and why don't you just declare for my position, which is an 8-year term. This way you'll serve as Chief Justice." He said, "I've served, and I've never served as Chief Justice because I was never elected for a term that would, for a full 8-year term." So I said, well, that makes sense. Since I am going to run, I want to be appointed, I'm going to be contested in either for the 4-year term that I will run or for the 8-year term, so I'll go for the 8. So Harry Stowers had made up his mind that he was going to go for the full 8-year term, and he winds up finding out that I had decided to run for that too. So he ran against me. And I was concerned that he was the presiding judge in Albuquerque, but no, I won very handily. But that's an interesting situation as to how, and then Harry Stowers later came on the court.
Well, you were in practice before you went up to the court.
24 years I practiced.
And was that here in Las Cruces?
Right.
What sort of a practice did you have?
I had a very general practice. I practiced personal injury litigation, divorces, anything, probate matters, anything that came into the door, I'd handle. Fact is, you know, I traveled all over the eastern part of the county. There were no Hispanic attorneys in this area. So they'd call me from Carlsbad to come over and represent somebody. And I'd go over there and I'd represent people all over the east side.
I assume you're bilingual.
Yes. Yes, I think I can make it to heaven. Because I believe that even if this guy that we think is St. Peter winds up being San Pedro, and he won't let us in because we don't speak the language, I can speak to San Pedro and he'll let me in. Well, you better learn it.
Yeah, you're right. Backing up to, you were the assistant district attorney, and then your district attorney got defeated, so you became the city judge. Then where did you go from there?
I became district attorney.
So you had to run for that position?
I had to run for that in 3 counties.
Okay.
Because in those in those days, the 3rd Judicial District was Doñana, Lincoln, and Otero. Now it's just Doñana.
Yeah. And how long were you district attorney?
8 years. 2 terms.
And did you just decide that you were ready to get into civil?
To get out, yeah.
When you were in the district attorney, when you were the district attorney, did you have any assistants?
Yes. I had Glenn Newmeyer was my assistant here in Doñana County, and Lalo Garza, who later became district judge here, was my assistant in Otero County, and Dick Parsons, who later became district judge in Lincoln, was my assistant in Ruidoso.
Well, did you have to travel a circuit then?
3 counties.
Ah. So when you went into private practice after your 2 terms, did you do any criminal defense?
Oh my, yes, I did. I had one of the most interesting cases that I had was the lady that shot and killed the 5 times mayor of TRC, Maria Heffernan, came to see me to represent her. She'd been charged with murder, and I decided that I'd represent her. And sure, she came from a very wealthy family in Oregon, and she could afford to pay attorney's fees of that type, you know. And I figured, hell, I want to charge her because hell, I want to have to be out of here. And she had shot and killed T.B. Williams because she was scared to death of him. She shot him, but she shot him through the screen door of the house he was trying to come in. And, well, anyway, the long and the short of it, she was acquitted. And so I did have some criminal law practice.
And of all the cases you had as a private attorney, which were your most interesting?
Criminal or civil, you mean?
Well, just...
well, anyway.
Yeah, either.
The practice of law made me think about the Supreme Court and what I would do to change the practice of law. When I practiced law, it was horrible that if a person that you were representing was 5% negligent and the other person was 95% negligent, that you'd get nothing. And I said, well, where's the fairness in this? So I wanted to abolish contributory negligence and set up some kind of a comparative degree of negligence doctrine. So that was one of the first things I did when I got on the court. I think I was the vote that changed the court in that respect. And there were some other things, I forget, let's see, contributory negligence and, I forget what other things, but I thought that it was bad enough that people were hurt and they were minimally at fault, or the jury felt that they were minimally at fault, and they'd get nothing in spite of their horrendous damages. So anyway, that made me think of the court.
Were there other people in practice here in Las Cruces that were influential to you?
There were 40 attorneys practicing law when I was here in Cruces. And
how many are there now?
Oh, over 100. There's so many more. So yeah, there were other attorneys here. The one that took me in his wing, Tom Camel, he was a DA, criminal law. And then when I went out to practice privately, Wayne Whatley, he was strictly a civil personal injury attorney, and Jess Weir. All of those guys are now dead, and it's just strange. The 5 members on the court, when I went up there, Sam Montoya, LaFell Oman, McManus, and Stevenson, they're all dead. I'm the only survivor from that court. The clerk of the court now used to clerk for me. And she reminded me of that when I went up to swear in Ray Ortiz as a district judge in the 1st Judicial District. Ray clerked for me. And it's an interesting thing, and the Chief Justice now clerked for me, Ed Chavez. So I thought, God, I must have done something right. The Chief Justice, the clerk of the court, both the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, and several judges all clerked for me, so I must have done something right.
They clerked for you when you were on the Supreme Court? Other than, you mentioned the issue about going from contributory negligence to comparative negligence is influencing your decision to run for the Supreme Court. What else made you decide to go for a statewide position?
That was also a happening. I was in federal court trying a wrongful death. I was representing this guy, Falcon, who was shot and killed in Otero County at a service station. It was a horrible situation. He went in to get some water, and he got involved in a hassle with the person that owned the station, and they shot and killed him. Well, I filed suit in federal court, and we were trying the case here in Las Cruces in federal court. And the presiding judge at that time was Ed Meacham. He was trying the case. He, during one of the recesses, he called me into chambers and he said he wanted to talk to me. And he throws the Albuquerque Journal in front of me, and I looked at it. Big headlines: Justice Martinez resigns. And I thought, so I read the article, and then Ed said, you're going to be appointed to that. And I thought, I didn't think anything about it, but I continued my practice. I had been in Carlsbad all day trying a case, and then as I was coming back home, I figured, I wonder why he said that. Well, anyway, I came back home and I told Rita, you know, there's an opening on the Supreme Court, and do you think I should apply for it? And she says, well, you know, you've been trying to do what you feel the good Lord has in store for you, and go ahead and apply. So you got to make yourself available. And she said, but don't be disappointed if you don't get it. And I said, oh, no, I'm not going to be disappointed if I don't get it. So I thought, well, I wonder why Ed Meacham said, the nerve of him, he's a Republican, I'm a Democrat. And he said that I was going to be appointed to this court. Well, I started writing letters to the Judicial Selection Committee. Top of the list was Russell Mann. Dear Russ, well, I'd been in court against these people so much that I was on a first-name basis with them. Then I wrote to the governor, Dear Governor Jerry. And I thought, oh my God, that's what he meant. He meant that I know the governor, I supported him, and that I've been practicing law sufficiently. And sure enough, that's what it was. The governor called me shortly after I submitted my application, and he said, hey, Dan, I'd like to talk to you about this. You made an application for the Supreme Court. And I said, could I see you Tuesday? And I said, no, Jerry, I'm in court Tuesday. How about Thursday? And he said, okay, I'll see you Thursday. So I drove up to Santa Fe to go see him, and that's what he wanted to talk to me about. He said, are you kidding? Are you willing to cut down your practice and quit your practice in Cruces and come up here? And I said, well, I'm willing to if you want me to, if you think that I cut out the bullshit, Dan. It's yours if you want it. And I said, well, Jerry, yeah, but give me a lot of time to wind up my practice because I've got a lot of cases on board. He said, well, they've been without a justice for, at that time it had been a few months. So he said, they can wait a little bit longer. And I said, okay. He said, I will make my announcement that I'm appointing you to the Supreme Court on the 4th of July, Independence Day, and then you can keep it quiet until then or do whatever you want. And I said, okay. So he did. He appointed me, and he appointed me on the 4th. But then McManus got on my back. McManus was the Chief Justice. He wanted me on the court right away. And I said, I can't, Mac. I just cannot. I can't. Well, anyway, I went on board in August of that year. So that's my story as to how I went to the Supreme Court. It was a happening.
Well, back then, did you fill the unexpired term?
I went up to fill the unexpired term of Justice Martinez, who had had a hell of a fight with McManus and with Donald Stevenson and with LaFelloma. They couldn't get along at all. He called them SOBs in front of the cameras and everything, you know. It was a turmoil on the Supreme Court. I went up here, I didn't know how things were. No, I quieted things down. I mean, they found that I wasn't the same and started getting along and fine. So I settled down and did my work there.
How long was that term before you had to run?
Well, it was a 4-year term. So I had to run for that 4-year term. Immediately, I was appointed in August, and then I had to run the following year. And instead of running for a 4-year term, I ran for an 8. See?
I see.
Strange things. And it was because of the law as it was then. It used to be that whoever is serving on the Supreme Court, who has been elected to a full 8-year term, who has the least number of years to run on that term, will be the Chief Justice. So that's why I became the Chief Justice. right after I was elected.
You must be probably the earliest, in terms of term-wise, Chief Justice that they ever had then.
No, I served the full. Oh yeah, that's right. Because later on we changed it to whereby it's up to the court to appoint. Yeah, so I served as Chief Justice in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. You So.
How long altogether were you on the Supreme Court?
16 and a half years. And at that time, I looked at all that had served the Supreme Court, and heck, I had served longer than all but 5. So I thought, my gosh, it's time for me to leave. So I decided not to stick it. But by that time, it was just accept or not, you know. So it wasn't even fun anymore.
A retention election, then, in other words.
Yeah, and you can't even defeat anybody on a retention election unless they're so damn terrible, horrible. So I campaigned against the constitutional amendment, but all the judges were for it. So I thought, oh, what could I do? So it passed, and we're stuck with it. But I always felt that it was a little bit making you a little bit more humble to go out and talk to the people and solicit their support. Tell them why you wanted to be there. Tell them why you felt it was necessary. So, but John Brennan and here Joe Galvan and even Lalo Garza, they changed their mind. They had before told me, no, that's elitist, this retention situation. Make it the understand. Well, they say it's otherwise, Lalo. They say that under the retention or rejection, that it'll be better for minorities to serve than now. But I disagree with it. Well, anyway, that's a story.
What would you consider some of the more significant cases that you decided in your tenure up there?
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I figured, well, since I had my stroke and I have difficulty remembering, what am I going to say? Well, anyway, one of the significant things was when we were talking about the death penalty. There was a case wherein this individual, McGee, I think his name was, had been killed. He was a guard at the penitentiary, and he had been killed. Two guys just accosted him, plummeted him, and pummeled him, and just killed him. And they were tried with first-degree murder in Santa Fe, but they were charged jointly, but tried separately. The first jury found the first guy guilty of murder in the first degree and found the aggravating circumstance that the guy that was killed was a corrections officer, so they gave him death. Guess what they did to the second one? The second one they found guilty of murder in the first degree, but they refused to find the given. They refused to find the given that the guy that he killed was a corrections officer, so they gave him life in prison. Now, I figured, well, how can that comport with due process, with a constitution, with treating everybody fairly? It can't. So I was against the death penalty from that time on. And interestingly enough, the last time that I ran for office, I was accosted on the east side with the TV cameras and all of that, telling me that one of the justices that I was having difficulty with, Reardon, on the court, he had endorsed his buddy, Tom Meskel, for the Supreme Court against me. He was running against me. He said, Justice Reardon says that we should elect Meskel for the Supreme Court because he's a conservative and he is for the death penalty. And he said, and that you are not a conservative and that you are against the death penalty. And I said, hey, wait a minute. I said, listen, you're wrong on both sides. I am conservative on some issues, liberal on others. But as far as the death penalty, yes, I'm against it. Not because I don't think that there are some guys that have committed such grievous offenses that they should forfeit their lives. It's because of the way it is applied. And I told them the story about what happened in this particular case. And they said, well, that makes sense to me too. I understand why. So I didn't have any problem. I went ahead and won. So anyway, the story is of my life.
But you enjoyed going out and campaigning.
Absolutely, absolutely. Made lots of friends there.
Because you then, once you're on the Supreme Court, you had to travel the entire state.
All over the state, right. I did, and made friends all over the state.
Were there any other major controversies that came up on the court during your tenure there?
Oh, well, the bar test. The bar test was a controversy as to, there was an allegation that it was slanted against minorities. And that is when we started testing, we brought in some experts to look at the test, and we changed it from passing at 80 or 90 to a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that it would be possible that you could fail one part of the test and still pass the bar if you got good high grades on the others. So the bar test was, but that wasn't a case. That was just administratively that we did that, yeah.
Well, a good part of what the Supreme Court does involves administrative issues, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's true, that's true. Because of my stroke, I can't remember. I can't remember what other significant things. There certainly were others that I know, but...
What would you say was one of the most difficult cases you had to decide?
That case where some kids were coming in from Texas. They were coming in here to, I guess, to the Glorieta Baptist Center. And they were coming through Fort Sumner where the bridge narrows, and they had a big bus, and they met another one, and boom, some of the kids were killed. And there was a suit against the state for negligence. And first of all, it was, we had decided that it was. But then Donald Stevenson changed his mind on the court and wound up deciding that it wasn't, because Tony Anaya, who was the Attorney General then, argued before us that the state was going to go bankrupt because of all the kids that had been killed and were suing the state. And I wrote a dissent in that case that I'm very proud of, where I said that these poor parents are going to be standing at the graveside and saying, hey, they couldn't do anything, they have no right, they have no remedy. And their child was killed through the negligence of somebody else. I forget the name of that case, but it was my dissent in that one that was significant.
Yeah. Realizing that it's, of course, at the appellate level, but what would you say makes for good lawyering at the appellate level?
Being articulate, being concise in what you argue, not referring to your darn briefs all the time, looking at the court while you argue instead of looking down at the briefs. Basically, that's it. You know, I used to even tell them when I was a Chief Justice, do not refer to your briefs. I said, we've read your briefs. We've read what you've submitted, and we're conversant with that. We understand that. So we're cognizant of them. Just argue to us. Don't just tell us what you have in your brief, since we know that. And no, they'd still go back and argue that.
How does it differ in terms of what makes for a good appellate lawyer versus a good trial lawyer, since you did both?
I think a good trial lawyer can be a good appellate lawyer if he agrees that somebody else may handle the brief for him and is only conversant with what he's got in the brief when he sees it, and he can go up and argue the case. So I used to do both. I used to do all my trial work, even though I had two guys with me all the time. I did all the trial work and all the appellate work. So I think it's possible for a good trial lawyer to be a good appellate lawyer too.
Are there different, any different characteristics for being a good trial lawyer? You sort of outlined what you thought made for a good appellate lawyer.
I guess a trial lawyer needs to know and understand people, needs to know and understand where he's at, who he is. That's very difficult, Sarah, to go ahead and pull out what you think would be this or that.
Do you think that the jury system itself has changed over the course of your career?
Oh, yes. When I was practicing law, I handled the first case where women were allowed to serve on a jury. That was on a change of venue in Chaves County. We went up there to try this first-degree murder case. And I was in the DA's office. And Mrs. Poe Korn was the first lady that served on a jury in New Mexico. And I asked the district attorney then, Pat Hannigan, I said, hey, Pat, do you think we ought to keep this lady? He said, oh, if she gets selected, she's harder than a cop. She'll be tough. Sure, keep her. And we did. So she was the first woman to serve on the jury. So,
what year was that?
1950. I think 54. Can you believe so? The women can now serve on the jury. Now they're as smart as men. Now you're running for president. So how about that? Things have changed.
Was there a statute then that prohibited women from serving on jurors?
I don't know whether it was a statute or whether it was just, I think it must have been. It must have been. Because women could not serve on a jury. And they never called them to serve on jury. They were never put on the jury wheel, you know. So.
What other changes have you noticed?
In the jury? Well, there's a lot of tendency in some things to go to a six-man jury, fashioned after the federal courts.
As a practitioner, do you think that's good or bad?
Well, as a defense attorney in a criminal case, I think it's terrible. Because you can get unanimity among six a lot easier than you can among 12. As a prosecutor, I think it's terrible that we don't have six-man jury. Basically, that's it.
Which judges would you say are at the top of your list in terms of your respect for them, their legal abilities, that sort of thing? And I'm just talking about over your entire career, not necessarily currently sitting judges.
Well, Phil Lohman was a very smart, intelligent justice, and a very smart and intelligent lawyer. The judges on the east side that I practiced before, oh my God, what are their names? I can't even think about it now. The 5th Judicial District has some real good judges on the bench. Sam Montoya was a good judge. He was a judge in the 1st Judicial District. I should be able to roll off like that, but I can't think about it right now.
Okay. You had mentioned your wife, Rita. How long have you been married now?
102 years. No, we've been married 57 years this August.
Tell me a little bit about your family.
Oh, God, I have 7 children, 27 grandchildren, 8 or 9 great-grandchildren, and more coming.
Any more lawyers in your family? Any of your kids?
Well, yeah, Dan and Steve are lawyers. And then some of their some of the grandchildren have indicated that they want to be lawyers, but I don't know whether it'll happen or not. There'll be three boys. They want to go to law school.
What are your primary interests now outside of law?
Rest and relaxation.
What do you do for rest and relaxation?
That's hard to come by. I do as much reading as I can, and we used to travel a lot, but now that Rita is she's having difficulty walking, we don't travel as much as we used to. We used to go all over Mexico. We used to go all over the world, in fact. We went all over Europe, but we don't do that anymore.
Well, you write as well, don't you?
No, Rudy does. You're thinking of Rudy Apodaca. Yeah, he's written 2 or 3 novels, yeah. No, I don't write.
Fly fish, any of that sort of thing?
No, I used to do some fishing, but I don't do any more of that either.
Are you still involved in the law in any respects now? On committees or?
No, I am not. Oh, wait a minute, I just am going to complete my 4th year as a member of the Judicial Standards Commission. I've been on it for 4 years, and my term is up at the end of this next month. And we have a meeting on the 16th of June, and that'll be my last meeting. And I told them, I said, please do not submit my name again for reappointment. I will not serve. I said, I've had it. It's difficult to get from here to Albuquerque and serve intensively on those cases. We don't do it that often, but when we do, when we're in there, we're there from 8 o'clock in the morning sometimes until 6 at night. And just to go through the docket, and it's tough. So I'm not going to serve anymore.
How would you say that the legal community has changed during your career?
Has changed me?
No. How has the legal practice or the legal community changed as you've seen it?
Well, since I am now on inactive status, I can't tell you because I'm not practicing. I see my son practicing, and I can see the changes. He's on the computer all the darn time. He's online on the computer, and never did that when I was practicing, Other than that, I don't know. And then he's got his printer that prints forms for him. We never had that.
Well, for instance, when you were in practice in Las Cruces, was it pretty compatible bar? I mean, did you socialize with other lawyers in the community? Did you get along? Or was there still some animosity, which there seems to be present now?
I guess there was some problems. I know that, most of the lawyers that were here in Las Cruces earlier were from the South. Rufus Garland, Forrest Sanders, the Camels. They came in from Tennessee, they came in from Arkansas, and they came in with their own thoughts. So I know that the bar was very divided one time, and I was so upset because I thought the bar would be the epitome of everything that was wise and smart. We were having a meeting, and the local bar, has been asked to give a contribution to the university, to this individual who was going to go to the university. And he was an athlete from Cruces High, but he was black. And one member of the firm, of the Sanders firm, said, "Hell, if the contribution goes to him, my firm's not contributing." And Forrest Sanders said, "Mine neither." And so, God, you had all these people. So I said, to hell with it. I quit. I didn't go there anymore to the bar because of those feelings of bigotry, and I couldn't believe that you would withhold an athletic scholarship to somebody who athletically had proven himself, you know. So we did have on that basis, but other than that, personal, no.
I would assume what you're talking about has changed as well over the years.
Yes, I'm sure that has changed. Hopefully. Yeah, we've got a black man running for president too.
Yeah.
Just like the woman who serves on a jury and is now running for president.
Justice, what do you consider your most significant contribution to law?
I thought you were going to ask for life. I'm going to say my family. To law. That would be a hard one. I don't know. I served long on the Supreme Court. God, I served more terms as Chief Justice than anybody else that has served, you know. And maybe that was my contribution.
I gather you must have been a calming influence to have served that long.
Yep, I guess I was. And I had very, very little difficulty with anybody except one justice. And he left. He didn't serve too long. And he later ran for district judge in Albuquerque and was defeated. Strange, coming from the Supreme Court to a district judge and then being defeated.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any particular words of wisdom that you'd like to pass on to young lawyers?
Don't become so involved in thinking of self that you forget others. Because really it's in helping others that you're helping yourself become a better person and a better individual. I used to tell people after they were being sworn in, don't get so involved in making money. Don't go after that almighty dollar so hard that you forget to smell the roses or you forget to spend some time with your family. So that's about it.
And is that sort of what you would consider to be your legacy to the legal profession, or is there something else that you would pinpoint as your legacy?
You know, when you talk about the word legacy, it implies somebody that has done something great, and I don't feel that I have to where I would leave any kind of a legacy. My legacy to life has been my family, and I'm very, very proud of my grandchildren. I've got 3 beautiful girls, 3 grandchildren. 2 of them are teaching school in Albuquerque, and the other one is getting ready to go to college and possibly also be an educator. So anyway, it's my children and my grandchildren. That is my legacy.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave, since we're making a record of this? And,
well, I'd like people to forgive me for not putting a tie on and wearing proper clothes, since I didn't know it was going to be this intrusive. I didn't know I was going to be on camera. I thought you were going to sit down and just talk to me about, how was life in Cruces in the 50s when you practiced. And I didn't think that it was going to be this elaborate. If I had known that, I'd have dressed, and please forgive me for not dressing.
Well, are there any other aspects, such as life in Las Cruces in the 50s or anything like that, you'd like to go into in more detail? I mean, some of these things we've just sort of skimmed over, I think, and maybe some things that you feel had a greater influence on you, or that you had a greater influence on, and I want to give you a chance to talk about that.
It is difficult, Sarah, to go out and single anything in particular. I know the practice of law, to me, was very satisfying. Like any time else, I used to sweat going before a jury when the case was being. But then after I did, I felt great. You know, it's very satisfying. And I guess that's something that you can tell the lawyers, that not to be afraid of the practice of law, that it is very gratifying. It it feeds you. It feeds you. In fact, I don't mean monetarily. I mean it feeds you. It makes you a better person.
Okay.
That's it. That's it. And thank you very much for thinking of me.
Well, I thank you very much for spending your time.
I'm very sorry that I confused Sarah Bradley with Sarah Singleton. You two are very, very different.
Not a problem. Thank you so much.
All right.